Hi, welcome back to Library Friends. So, we left off with Frederick. They are at the camp leader's cabin office, looking at the phone, thinking, how do we get in here? How do we break in to make this phone call? And Specs is really trying to encourage him to do the wrong thing, break the window and break into the office. And Frederick is thinking, I may be a flea and I may be like the bottom of the barrel here, but I'm not a bad person. And he's not. So he's huffing and puffing and he's taking a break. He's just walking it off because he's angry. Specs keeps agitating him. So let's find out in chapter 11, A Constellation Fleus Tinius. The lights from camp had shrunk to no more than twinkles in the trees behind them, and they were still walking down the dark road. What are we doing out here, Dash? The professor asked, not for the first time. We are walking, Frederick answered loudly. Shh! Nosebleed, Specs, and the professor and Ant Bite shushed him. They walked in silence for a while. Why don't we go back to camp now? Nosebleed suggested, a plaintive whine in his voice. I don't want to go back to camp, Frederick insisted. I want to walk. At first, Frederick had started walking because he was trying to get away from Eric's cabin and delay the moment when the others realized once and for all that Dash, or Frederick, wasn't the fearless, cool guy that he pretended to be. But as the night air filled his lungs, his feet had fallen into a rhythm, and the high-pitched chirring of the cicadas and the squelching bellows of the bullfrogs had gotten so loud and frequent that it melded into a single night sound, lulling Frederick into a trance-like state. It was like as long as he was walking, he didn't have to think about any of his problems. He didn't have to worry about Eric or about his mom or about how his mom was probably going to be mad at him for getting lost or how when he went back to his regular life, he was still going to be the same old flea-like Frederick. He wished he could keep walking forever, but eventually his legs slowed like a wind-up toy grinding to a halt, and he stopped. The others walked a few steps before they realized he wasn't moving anymore. We're going back now? Nosebleed squeaked. My legs are tired, Frederick announced. And he sat down right there on the pavement, stretched his legs straight in front of him, and lay back, letting his arms flop at his sides. The pavement radiated heat that was left over from the sun, and the warmth soaked into Frederick's spine. The back of his hand rested against the painted yellow line. His chest rose and fell steadily. Above him, the sky was littered with more stars than he had ever seen before. Frederick had never lain in the middle of a road. This is weirdly comfortable, he said. One of the boys sighed. Then somebody was sitting down beside Frederick and stretching out. Should we be lying in the middle of a road? Nosebleed asked when all five of them were sprawled out across the asphalt like accident victims. Nobody answered. What are we going to do if a car comes? Nosebleed said more insistently. Get up, the professor suggested. Move out of the way? We'd see the headlights before it got here, Ant Bite said. They were silent for a few moments. I wish I was in my bed, Nosebleed said in a small voice. I wish I never had to go to school again, the professor sighed. I wish I could make the Iron Man suit, Ant Bite said. Like for real, and then I'd fly wherever I wanted to go. That's stupid, Specs said. No, it isn't, Ant Bite snapped. Then Frederick said, I wish I was on a cruise. A cruise? Specs snorted. What do you know about a cruise? I've been on lots of cruises, Frederick said. I would go down the water slide 10 times, he said, and then I would go up to the bar and get a strawberry daiquiri. His eyes fell shut as he imagined it. The sun, giant and blazing in the sky, steel drum music so energetic that you could almost see the shiny sounds bouncing off the deck, the smell of coconut oil sunscreen, a frozen drink, and a brain freeze headache, and the chocolate fountain at the midnight buffet, Frederick murmured. There's no such thing as a chocolate fountain, Specs said. Yes, there is, said Nosebleed. When my sister got married, there was a chocolate fountain at the reception. So? Specs' voice was frustrated. So do they drain the water and put the chocolate in? Do they clean it first? It's not a real fountain, it's small, Nosebleed explained. Like a little fountain that sits on a table, and it's just for chocolate. It's not what a cruise is, though, Frederick said, his words slurring together. The daiquiris and fountains and beach, it's all good. But what a cruise really is a chance to get away from all your problems. The boys were quiet for a long time. Swear on your mom's life there's a chocolate fountain, Specs demanded. Frederick sighed. Normally, he refused to swear anything on his mom's life because if it turned out that he was making a mistake, he didn't want to have accidentally killed her. And in this case, Frederick, even in his confused, sleep drunk state, knew what he was talking about. He lifted one heavy arm and let his hand plop down over his heart like he was reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I swear to you on my mother's life, he said, there are chocolate fountains. A moment of silence followed this pronouncement. You know what I did to get into Omagashi? The professor said suddenly. What? Frederick asked. I didn't try out for the middle school football team. The professor's voice was quiet, not traveling farther than the five of them as he spoke. Frederick wondered how not trying out for football was bad enough to get you sent to Camp Omagashi. He had assumed that the boys who were sent to disciplinary camp had done something really, really bad. The professor went on. I had a growth spurt at the end of school last year, 7 inches in 3 months. I ate so many bologna sandwiches, and the coach at school, he kept telling me, I've got to join the team. I've got to try out. Don't just think of yourself, the professor said in a gruff growl, like he was imitating the coach. Think of what you can do for your school. And then he sighed. But I don't want to be on the team. I like to watch football, and I like to read. That's it. So I never put my name on the sign up sheet and didn't go to the first tryout. The next thing I know, the guidance counselor sends a letter to my parents about how I won't participate at school because I have a bad attitude, and maybe I should go to this camp. His voice trailed off. What did your parents do? Aunt Bite asked. I mean, they took your side, right? No, they sent me here, didn't they? The professor said. He didn't sound angry, just resigned. Do you guys want to know what I did to get sent here? Specs asked eagerly. No, Frederick and Aunt Bite said together. Not really, the professor said. I want to know, Nosebleed's voice called. I broke somebody's glasses, Specs said and then paused. Frederick sighed. I broke my teacher's glasses, Specs said with a note of awe in his voice, like he couldn't believe it himself. Nobody said anything for a while. Did you hear what I said? Specs demanded. The professor grunted. How do we know you're not just saying that? He asked. You may just want us to think you're tough. I did do it, Specs insisted. How do we know you're not just saying all that stuff about football, huh? We should do it, Aunt Bite said suddenly. We should go on a cruise. Us? Frederick said, and his first thought was that there was no way any of them would ever go anywhere together. But then, to his surprise, he found that he could easily imagine being on a cruise with Nosebleed and Professor and Aunt Bite and even Specs. They were all in lounge chairs with strawberry daiquiris, all careening down the water slide. If Frederick had imagined going on a cruise with the boys from Group 13 earlier in the day, he would have been terrified. But now, with all of them sprawled out in the asphalt, he wasn't afraid at all. Today had actually been kind of fun. While he had been climbing the rope or swimming or arguing with Specs, it hadn't felt particularly fun. But looking back on it, he realized that it had been. Even arguing with Specs, Frederick had felt like he was a part of something, like he belonged. Yeah, Frederick said. That'd be great. Let's go then, Aunt Bite said. Let's go now. We'd get into trouble, Nosebleed said. We're not supposed to leave camp. We're not even supposed to be out here. I'd be worth it, said Professor at once. To get to go on a cruise, it'd be worth it. The counselors would send me out a search party for us, Nosebleed said. Call our families and tell them we were missing. We could slash our tires, Aunt Bite suggested quickly. And smash the telephone, Specs added, if Dash wasn't too scared. I'm not scared, Frederick protested groggily. And then they couldn't follow us or tell on us, said Ant Bite. Ant Bite finished. Frederick opened his eyes and let his head fall sideways so he could look at the younger boy. Ant Bite's eyes were closed, and for the first time since Frederick had met him, he looked happy. Happy at the thought of slashing tires, and still, it was nice. How will we get there, though? Specs asked. Frederick pointed his face toward the stars again and closed his eyes. Take Interstate 16 until you get to 95, then go south all the way to Port Verde Shoals. Are they really going to do it? Are we really going to do it? Nosebleed asked. I'm not scared, Specs said. Let's do it, the professor said. Let's do it for real. Frederick didn't know how long Group 13 lay in the road beneath the glittering stars, soaking up the heat from the pavement and imagining every detail of their dream vacation. He just knew that at some point that night, the others got up and Nosebleed and the professor, being the biggest, hauled him to his feet and draped his arms over their shoulders, and they staggered back to their cabin and to a peaceful slumber. So it looks like Frederick is kind of getting to know his Team 13 a little better, and he's not as frightened. He's kind of come to terms, and we'll have to see what Chapter 12 brings. And Chapter 12 is a failure to communicate. Thank you for reading with me, and we'll stay tuned for next week.